So today we will build a patch from scratch with the new dark energy voice from the geodesics. If you are familiar with the original energy voice, dark energy builds upon it and gives us access to more controls. I really enjoyed exploring it ever since it got released. I even released a small collection of presets with it. If you are interested, there's a link in the description to where you can get it, together with many more presets. There are probably more than 300 already, and I continue adding to them every month. Dark energy, just like the other modules in the geodesics collection, is available for free, so consider supporting the developers. If you right click the modules in the info section, you can click the donate button and support the developers. But now let's start with the patch. So as always, I have clocked from impromptu, I have the mind meld mixer with plateau as a send reverb, and I will be using also the cable color key for color coding everything. And let's start with the sequence. So for this, I will use ions, this one here. Of course, it's also from the geodesics collection. Now, every module in this collection is very deep, so I will try to keep this all about dark energy and not do anything too crazy with the other modules. So for now, let's clock ions with the multiplied by 2 clock. Again, from the clock module I have here, I will set it to multiplied by 2, and this will go, clocks will be blue. This will go to the global clock input. You see, we already have movement, and I will use also the reset, just so I can reset everything later on. Right, and with ions, we get basically 2 8-step sequences that share one step, and we can also turn this into a 16-step sequence. But for now, again, let's keep it simple. And I would like to use one sequence for pitch and stay in scale. So for this, I will use the Revin quantizer. Right, we get 4 inputs that we can use. We can also switch between scenes and add movement. So I will use the yellow sequence for pitch. Pitch will be also yellow. Right, this will go to the quantizer. From there to dark energy, we have here a volt per octave input. And on dark energy, we have 3 outputs we can use. Right, we have 2 oscillators that will cross modulate each other. We have the M oscillator, we have the C oscillator, right? And we have the what's called the so-called final output, right? This will output the result of both oscillators. So I will use this for now. This will go to the mixer, right? And I will start adding notes on the quantizer. So I will go with C, E flat, and G, right? So for now, 3 notes. And I will create a sequence just by changing the steps for the yellow sequencer here. Right, so we have for now an 8-step sequence. I will already add some reverb. Again, I have plateau here set as a send reverb, so I can just add some reverb. Right, so we have this sequence, and already something interesting dark energy has. It has a built-in VCA and envelope we can use. And this is a unique setup since it will automatically trigger with each change in pitch. Right, so if I activate this button here, the amp button, right, we get the envelope controlling the built-in VCA, and we have here the decay time of the envelope. Right, and again, if there is no change in note, the internal envelope will not be triggered, so we can create also rests. Right, so let's do something like this here, for example. Right, between these 2 notes there is no change, 2 steps, sorry, so the envelope will not be triggered and we get a rest. Let's do this here as well. I just have the same value set here on both steps. Right, so there is no change in note and the envelope will not be triggered. Right, so now we can use the blue sequence, for example, to control the decay time of the envelope. Right, modulation will be green and this will go to the mod decay input. Right, and now let's say here I would like to have more decay. Right, something like this. Let's have some fun now also with the delay. I will use tap dancer from flag. Right, I will send dark energy into it and then send this to the mixer. Right, now on tap dancer we have the ducking control that will give more space to the dry signal when it's playing. And it will duck the delay line. We can add also some drive. Add some modulation to the delay time. Make this a bit more wobbly. Take the mix a bit down. Right, something like this. Right, and now let's add movement to the quantizer. Right, so I can set two more scenes and move between them. Right, so let's do something like this. I will move to scene 2. And this will be, let's say, DFG. Right, and then scene 3 will be DGB flat. Right, and now again I can switch between them. Right, something like this. So I will use the ADDR sequencer from Bog Audio, which is perfect for exactly modulation like this, stepped modulation or step sequencing. Right, and I will use a divided clock, maybe a clock division of 16. Already I will send the reset to this sequencer, so everything will be in sync. Right, and now I will send this to the scenes CV input. Step 1 will stay with scene 1. Step 2 will be scene 2. Right, step 3 will be scene 1 and step 4 will be scene 3. Right, and now we will have 4 steps. So we have 1, 2, 1, 3. Right, this will be the sort of progression, if you will. Right, and I will connect the clock and reset everything. Let's listen to this for a second. Right? So we have a sort of a progression and it's not staying always on the same notes. Okay, now before we start changing the timbre of this voice, let's add another voice with another dark energy. In this case, I will use the Entropia sequencer again, also from the geodesics. Right, I will clock it with the same clock. Right, I can just hold control and take another copy. This will go to the certain clock input. Right, already you can see the sequencer is running. I will use also the reset again, just for that I can reset everything. In this case with Entropia, I will go with the 7-step sequence. If I click this button here, you can see it says length. If I click it once, it will remove 1 step. So instead of 8 steps, we have 7 steps. So this will be a 7-step sequence. Again, I will use the quantizer. I will use Revin to quantize this sequence. So it will go to the quantizer, from there again to the second dark energy. Right, I will already send again the final output, the E output, to the mixer. I will solo this also maybe. And add some reverb. and change the sequence. Again, we have 7 steps. Right, so we have something like this. And now with Entropia, we can inject random notes at random times by switching the yellow sequence to random with this button here. Right, also here we have 2 sequences, blue and yellow. So the yellow will be random, and then we can set probability per step. The inner circle, let me show you this. The inner circle is the blue sequence. The outer sequence is the yellow sequence. Right, so let's say step 3, I want to have random notes. We have here probability. I will take it all the way to yellow. And now with this knob here, we can set the random range. Right? And now I can set a probability to, let's say, 50%. So now there is a 50% chance that on this step we get a random note. Let's do this for step number 7 as well. 50, and take this up a bit, just so we have even more movement. Right, I'm going to take this voice down from the quantizer. We have here octave control, so I will take this an octave down. Right, and now we have a few options we can use to change the timbre, to change the brightness, to change the character of this voice. Right, so first of all, dark energy, just like the original energy, is a ring modulation voice. So one oscillator will modulate the amplitude of the other oscillator. So already the default sound is quite interesting. Right, but we can add also FM with the cross FM controls. So the oscillators will modulate each other's frequency, or in this case, the phase. And this will basically change the timbre. So here we have one for oscillator M. Here we have one for oscillator C. This is the modulating oscillator. Right, we have also feedback modulation. So each oscillator will modulate its own frequency, or again, phase in this case. Right, we can also change the tuning ratio between the oscillators. We have here the tuning or the frequency controls. Right, but we can also lock the tuning to so-called musical intervals and get different, again, so-called more musical results. Here we have the frequency mode button. If I click it once, it will activate the ratio. So now the frequency will be locked to octaves and fifths. Right, something like this. Right, so now we can start adding modulation and movement to some of these controls and change the sound over time. For this, I will use Branes, of course, also from the geodesics. This is a sample and hold module in its core, so it will generate stepped random signals. I will trigger the upper section with the same multiplied clock. Again, I hold control so I can take another copy, and this will go to the middle section here. This is the trigger or clock input, if you will. Right, and now we can change the range of the upper section here to positive values on the right and bipolar values on the left by clicking this button here, the noise range. And now here this will be 0 to 10, this will be negative, positive 5. Right, now I can use, for example, the positive values to add some movement to the cross FM on dark energy. So if I take the white noise output and this will go to the cross index input. Now we have here the attenuverter. Maybe I will change the ratio. Right? So now we have some modulation. Right, I can also modulate the self-modulation, the self-FM, the feedback. Let's take the blue output. Right, again to the CV input, and now we have the inverter, so we have some movement. I'm going to add even more movement to this with the bandpass filter. So I will use tangents from Volt. Right, I will send this voice to the bandpass input, takes a resonance up. Right, and now we have this movement. And I will add movement to this with a bipolar output of Branes, but I want it to be smooth modulation, so I will use the VCV process module to add some slew to everything. Right, so if I take, for example, the blue output, this will be now bipolar, it will go to the input of the process module, and from the slew output to the filter, and I will add slew to it to make it smooth modulation source. Right, just like this. By the way, if you feel like you need more support when it comes to various concepts of synthesis like sample and hold and slew and so on, have a look in the description. There's a link to various courses I have available online, so if you are interested, again, links in the description. Right, I'm going to add now another process module. I will just duplicate what I have here, and I will use another bipolar signal, and this will modulate, again, through the slew output, the panning of this voice on the mixer. Just so we have also some movement there, maybe even more slew to this one. Right, I will listen to this, so let's listen to this, the first voice as well. Right, let's add quickly also some modulation to the first voice. I will use a bipolar modulation from Branes, again to modulate the feedback modulation here through the self-mod CV input index. Bring this up. Right, open the attenuverter. And now if I click this button here to activate the LED for the self-FM, right, so I click it once and I click it twice. Right, so the LED is lit here in this section. Now this means that positive values will affect or will modulate one oscillator and negative values will affect the other oscillator. So again, since we have a bipolar signal from Branes, we get double modulation. You can see this also here on the lights, I hope. Right, you see when one is lit, the other one is dim, and vice versa. Something like this. Maybe I can take the level of the second voice a bit down from the gain. Right, not so much. Right, okay, so now let's add a bass to this. I will use another dark energy. Right, this time I will mix the two individual outputs. So for this I will use Taurus, of course, also geodesics. Right, again, this module is also quite deep, but I will use it only as a mixer in this case. So I will start with the M oscillator. The M output will go to the one of the inputs here on Taurus. Right, this will go to the mixer. Opalach, this will go to the mixer, and I will solo this for a second. Right, and we will have a look at this also on the scope, just so we can see what's going on. Right, so this is now the M oscillator, right? It's basically a sine wave, as you can see. If I also connect the C oscillator to the mixer, and this will be, maybe I will use a green cable here for the scope. Right, we can see that first of all, it's also a sine wave, but it's an octave up, so it's double the frequency. And you can see also that the C output is unipolar. Right, so first of all, what I will do, I will take the C oscillators 2 octaves down. Right, from the frequency, I can just right click and enter -2. So now the C oscillator is 2 octaves down. And I can take also the main frequency an octave down, so again, -1 in this case. Very nice. You can get rid of the scope, and let's unmute everything. Right, and now let's take already care of the pitch. So what I will do, I will use a dummy cable with another input here, with the third input of the quantizer. Now I am using a dummy cable. Basically it's a cable that's connected to nothing, or there will be no voltage there, because the quantizer is normaled. So each sequence will go to the following input if nothing is connected, which means that from here we will get also the second sequence. This is not what I want. So I'm going to connect just a dummy cable to one output I'm not using here, so there is no voltage coming here, the third input. Right, so it will basically just follow the scenes that we change. Right, so now it will follow the scenes because the notes on the quantizer change. Right, if I disconnect this dummy cable, it will play the same sequence, but this is not what I want. Now another thing we can do is we can use the internal envelope also for modulation, as a modulation source, and this we can do with the mod destination button. Right, if I click it once, for example, now it will go to the cross modulation here, to the cross FM. Right, so now if I turn this on a bit, right, I can change the decay of the envelope and also the amount. Again, now the internal envelope will be routed internally to the self FM. Right, maybe a bit more. And again, this will happen only with a change of notes. I can also route this to the self index here, to the self FM. Okay, now of course a technique I use all the time, sending the bass through a high-pass filter, or a copy of the bass through a high-pass filter, and a delay to add another layer. So I'm going to use another tangents, send a copy of this bass voice to the high-pass input here, and then I will just use the delay from VCV, set the frequency, so now everything right above this will go to the delay. Use the wet output so I don't get a dry signal. Add some reverb. Right, add feedback. Change the time a bit. Right, something like this. Right, so we get some delay. Right, I will add also the LFO from Bog Audio and LFO to modulate the panning of this voice, again through the mixer. Right, something like this. So we have also a bass. Now there's a lot more to explore with dark energy as a sound source, but it can also be a very interesting modulation source. So now let's explore this a bit. I will use black holes, also geodesics of course, as a VCA. Right, and I will use noise from Branes. Right, if I use the lower Branes, since nothing is connected to the trigger input, it will output basically noise. Right, so if I take, for example, the white noise output, right, we will get noise. So this will go to the mixer, and I can show you this, right? So we get basically white noise. So now we can use another dark energy as a complex modulation source. I will use another dark energy, right? And I will send the final output as a modulation source with the green cable to the CV input of black holes, right? And now set it to an LFO. Again, we have this frequency mode buttons. If I click them twice, we have the low mode, which is basically low frequency. Right, I can change the range on black holes to 5 volts, so it will work better with the LFO, with the range of the LFO. Let's look at this on the scope. Right, so this will be the modulation source, and I will already send this through, again, a low pass filter in this case, so it's not too harsh. Right, but let's have a look here again on the scope. This is the modulation source. This is what's coming out of energy, or dark energy actually. Right, so we get this interesting shape, but we can make it even more complex. Again, I can add cross FM. Right, I can add self FM. I can change the ratio and the tuning. In this case, it's the rates of the LFOs, because we have two now, one modulating the other. Right. So we have a complex modulation source, and with dark energy we can also reset this modulation and get something more repetitive. We have the reset inputs. Right, so if I use, for example, a clock division of 4, with each clock division the two oscillators will be reset. Get something more repetitive. Right, something like this. Something more rhythmic. Right, we can even use the internal envelope to bring it in and out by using the same clock as a gate source. We have here the external mod input. If I use again the clock and turn on the amp button here, right, have a look on the scope, we get the modulation only together with the clock division. Something like this. Add reverb, of course. This is channel 5. Oh yes, turn the levels a bit down, cut the lows out all the way, no need for low frequencies here. Right, I can modulate the filter with another output of the upper Branes, just to add some movement. Right, add more panning modulation with another LFO, again through the mixer. Maybe not so much, take the scale down. Right, write something like this. So we get complex modulation that is repetitive. It comes in with the internal envelope. Right, and again, there is so much to explore still. Dark Energy is a beautiful addition to the geodesics collection. You can download this patch, of course, if you are interested. There's a link in the description. There are many things you can add to it and tweak in this patch. If you get interesting results, feel free to share them with me. Again, consider supporting the development of this collection. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you again. Cheers!